Value is everything. You heard a lot from our speakers earlier, did a great job of talking about value. I want to unpack and develop this for you. Everybody thinks that value is about money. So I'm going to try a little experiment. I appreciate if you'll play along with me. How many of you would like to, I'd like you to stand. I'd like to give you a little break. How many of you would like to pay the lowest price for a product or service? I want you all to stand. Don't you want to pay the lowest price for a product or service? Isn't that what everybody says? Come on, stand up. All right, look around. The lowest price for a product or service that you consider a commodity. Maybe it's some paper towels that they're all the same, okay? Now, here's the second part of the question. I think everybody's standing, which is okay. How many of you want to pay the lowest price for a product or service regardless of how it performs? Sit down. If you agree. We got one standing? No? He's a little hard of hearing like me. We've got 59,000 people now over the last 20 years that I've asked around the world. Only one person who did miss the question stayed standing or held their hand up. The truth of the matter is, this is not value. This is value. Value is determined first by time. And it doesn't mean that everything's always fast, but it means your perception of time, your guest's perception of time. Sometimes they want it to be slow if they're getting a massage, and other times if they're checking in, they want it to be very quick. But it's exceeding the expectations of time. Now, we know from our research, it's not the money that's first. It's always time. So time is of the essence in everything we do. Secondly comes the feelings, the ideas that really develop around this emotional commitment we've talked about. And the theory I want to share with you of how this develops and why this is so important is that the theory of Gestalt was discovered and really developed by Kurt Kafka, a German psychologist in the 1920s. And the theory of Gestalt that he discovered is that if you form a gestalt or a percept in your mind on a certain brand, a certain thing, then the sum is different than the parts. Now, not necessarily bigger than the parts, but different than the parts. So let me give you an example. At Baylor University, they're doing research with people, putting them under electromagnetic forces. They're fine. They're not hurting them or anything. But they're measuring what goes in the brain and where it's stored. Genuine brands who people believe to be genuine brands get stored in a different place. So the mind's eye is where all of you store information. Now you get thousands of input a day going through your mind. But when you develop a percept on something, and when it's positive, and when it connects with you emotionally, it gets stored in a different place in your mind, and therefore, you've got Gestalt. So in value, and what we, I think, heard earlier, it's up to us to take control of our perceived value, not let someone else determine what that is. So let's talk a little bit for a couple minutes about keeping promises. We talked about a guarantee, talked about how important it was. The promise of your business, it's your internal promise, remember. It's that which you share with your team and your staff. And when people come in the morning, they may get their functional things ready, they may get their trays set up, they may get their rooms clean, but what they're really thinking about is how do I want each and every person that I come into contact with today to feel special. Now you all do this really well. I remember visiting the 1770 getaway at Agnes Water. They brought out the most beautiful buffet lunch I've ever seen on a terrace outside. It was like something out of a movie. I thought I was in a movie. And then I tasted the tomato relish. Oh my gosh. I mean, it was so good I had to take 8 jars home. But here was the secret to what Elvis does. They make the relish, but they also sell the relish to their guests. So they give you a chance to take the brand home. So that's when we're talking about products and services that are unique. It's real easy. It doesn't have to be something that costs a lot of money. The second thing about keeping promises is to make sure that you have a clearly defined action step. Most organizations that are actively involved in delivering their promise will have between 10 and 50 action steps. Now, don't get alarmed, over 3 to 5 years. A promise is a lifetime commitment. It is not something for this year's budget. In fact, genuine brands that I'm aware of and brands that we work with, the promise drives the budget cycle. After they've decided how they want people to feel, then they decide where they're going to spend their money to achieve that certain reaction. So, promise is nothing without the action plans, but this is a long-term commitment. So some of you started the journey last year, some of you will start the journey today. It's a journey for life.